Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're here. We're going to do a quick update of our plant Terra the Titan's impending bloom at the Conservatory of Flowers. My name is Drew, and I work with the volunteers in the education department at the Conservatory. And my guest today is Anne, who is one of our volunteers at the Conservatory. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Drew. Hey,
how are you today?
Are you?
I'm good.
Hi,
I'm good.
How are you doing? Good.
Good to hear. So yeah, I'm broadcasting from my house, which I've made to look like a little conservatory at the moment. But
it's very impressive. I'm just going to say that.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
So I know it's been a while.
I'm in a sterile apartment in San Francisco, so sorry about that.
Hey, that's okay. I think that's part of why we all love the conservatory so much, is that we get to escape to a sort of a tropical place. So I was just getting ready to ask. I think I know you live fairly close to the conservatory, so I imagine you might have been by recently. So anything you can give us from the outside?
I was there yesterday, and I took some beautiful fog sweeping pictures of the building from the outside as I approach. I live on Page Street, and it's exactly 1 mile to the conservatory, 20-minute walk. And I really enjoy getting out and walking it. And I've been checking in the front door every day for the last few days since Terra has been kind of moved into kind of a prime position inside the glass door. And I've been standing there like some sort of weirdo, taking lots of pictures and encouraging people to take a peek inside the glass as well. So everything looks great. And then this morning it was just stunning with such a beautiful day that we have here. And of course, the dahlias also looked amazing, which at your recommendation, I took a look at, and that was beautiful too.
Oh, good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're wonderful. I'm also glad. I mean, the road's closed there in front of the conservatory, so it's kind of nice. People can really get in and walk around and enjoy the dahlias without risk of any road vehicles. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah. And the horticulturist for the park, the front area, I don't know if you've seen it recently, is just stunning at the moment. It's a wash with, I think they're foxgloves and just so many beautiful colors. It's stunning. Like, it's never looked better.
I was there yesterday. I thankfully got to go in for just like 45 minutes to get some video for our education programs. And I was also noticing the foxgloves. They've always been one of my favorites. They're just so spectacular when they're full bloom. So great. Well, speaking of the conservatory, should we take a look at the live feed? What do you think?
I think so. Let's see what's happening now.
Let's take a look over there. So there she is. Our star of the show right now is Terra the Titan. So as Anne mentioned,
it's hard to get an idea of how big she is. I was just
it's really
hard from this angle. Yeah.
I noticed today that our horticulture team did some shuffling. It looks like they've moved Terra a little bit closer to the door, which is great for viewing. It does throw off the perspective a little bit. So I took some photos just yesterday. I haven't quite got them into the computer quite yet. But really the top of that spadix, which we'll talk about a little bit more detail here in a moment, is probably about the height or higher than the double doors. Would you agree, Anne? I think you've seen it in person there. So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's grown tremendously. I don't have the exact measurements in front of me, but this last week we usually expect these corpse flowers, the Amorphophallus titanum, to grow anywhere from 3 to 4 inches or more every 24 hours. So we just really could confirm that it was a bloom on the 5th of August, and here we are at a towering bloom fairly shortly after. So real quick though, before we get started, Anne, I did want to ask, do you have any favorite plants in the conservatory that aren't corpse flower related?
That aren't, and I've been very fortunate volunteering over the last few years to have seen a few corpse flowers with yourself. And that's been amazing. I think volunteering and walking around the conservatory and just talking to people, I think one of the plants or the species of plants that get, if I'm using the right terminology, that get a lot of attention are the carnivorous plants. And it's always super interesting to point those out to people. I particularly love the pitcher plant, the impending in the aquatics. And I love being able to draw people's attentions to the different sizes that we have and imagine the different types of predators that they go after, or they passively attract and trap forever. I love explaining how it works, and I love that it's the actual picture is evolution from the leaf.
Right.
So to be able to, which in passing you wouldn't necessarily notice, and people assume they're for pollination, like with the corpse flower, which is for pollen. They assume that, but then you explain that they are truly the carnivorous plant, and this is how they work, and it's just that's definitely one of the more fun plants to point out to people, and it generates interest for young and old.
I agree. I have some carnivores on the way, some seeds on the way from Hawaii. I couldn't resist, so we'll see how that goes in a few weeks. But
this is some COVID shopping.
Yeah, I can't help myself. But I guess there's worse things to hoard.
There's worse things to spend your money on. Yeah, absolutely.
So today, I thought, in addition to our live look over there, we'd maybe talk about a few of the other members of the Amorphophallus family. So just to do a real quick recap here, kind of take us back to probably high school biology, we've got the scientific organizational life known as taxonomy. So this is all kind of big scientific words, but for our intents and purposes, this is all the ways that life is organized into categories so that we can better study them. And today, to make it clear and just easy to understand, we're going to just talk about these three here: the family, the genus, and the species. So the family is Araceae, or also known as the arums. This includes some other well-known plants that we'll look at towards the end of our talk here. We also have the Amorphophallus, and in this case, the corpse flower is species Titanum. So these three categories are probably the ones we talk about most often with plants. And today, we wanted to look at a few in this genus. So here we have a photo of Amorphophallus henryi. And I know, Anne, earlier you told me that you haven't experienced the scent of this one in person. But I was remarking, it reminds me of, anytime you're walking around and maybe it's a warm day, if you get close enough to a sewer grate, you might get a waft of that lovely scent from under the street. And that is really, this one is tiny. I mean, the bloom here is maybe, 2 feet tall at most, and it will smell up the entire conservatory. So this one also is a more frequent bloomer than our corpse flower at 3 to 5 years. This one blooms sometimes every year and sometimes more often than that.
So. And not the most attractive.
No, it definitely looks like a piece of rotting meat or something. And this next one is really special. So we've got here Amorphophallus bulbifer. So you see there again, it's in the same genus, Amorphophallus and bulbifer. And these plants can reproduce in a couple of ways. Most of them only reproduce, you can see there on the right, that pinkish colored flower, or bloom, I should say more accurately. And then on the left, you see here a leaf. Now, underground for all these plants, they reproduce and they grow from this underground corm, which is kind of like a tuber or potato. And in the center of the leaf there, you can see that little tiny corm there. So do you think, Anne, that might help the plant in the wild? What do you think?
Suppose so, yeah. I don't know. I haven't given it much thought. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Well,
so
I suppose then if it drops or it gets fallen, it would start to germinate itself, and that would be how it would reproduce. It's got two methods. If it's also got the bloom and then it's also got the corm, which is just almost like a fruit, but not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you can make little reproduction, like little clones of yourself right on the leaf. And these leaves only last at most for about a year or one growing season. And so this leaf would decompose very quickly, and then these can grow into brand new plants right there on the ground, which is really advantageous when you're, maybe you don't get pollinated here in the bloom, and so you end up having to reproduce without pollination.
So I have a question then, so which we haven't talked about, but when you have the corpse flower, when you have the structure that we see today, you don't have any leaves. You don't have them at the same time. 1 minute it's a leaf. The leaf works to store all the energy and carbohydrates and builds up the corm on the ground. And when it has enough power, it sends up and it knows it wants to reproduce. It sends up the flower structure that we see. So on that
Right.
particular species, does that have twice the chance of reproducing itself if it's also
Oh, that's a
giving a
good point.
corm on the leaf, as well as,
I,
it must be more common.
Definitely. And that one, I believe, I'll have to double check. There's a few of these. So the next one we were going to look at is also used for a food product. And I believe that Amorphophallus bulbifer can also be used. Most of these, the corm is very starchy, and so you can use it as a food product. But that's an interesting observation. So we're thinking maybe these leaves, I mean, they do produce more leaves than blooms, is I think what you're getting at there. And so it definitely increase the chances of it reproducing successfully. That's a great observation. And then the very last one, which I think we both agree is probably our favorite of this selection as far as looks goes. It's a beautiful
it's polka dot.
Yeah, it's like a polka dot. I was looking at it again. It almost looks like a galaxy, like a photo of space. I don't know, a nice star field there.
I see what you mean. Yeah,
kind of swirly, and you've got like nebulas, maybe. I don't know. I got a little imaginative there, but this one is definitely used. So I mentioned that some of these are used for food source. A lot of them are from Southeast Asia, and for many, many, maybe hundreds of years even, they've been used as mostly famine foods, but there are some widely cultivated versions. Because the corm is so starchy, you can really feed, and some of them are large. I mean, the Amorphophallus titanum, the corm can be up to 300 or more pounds. So you can imagine how many people you could feed with, I always say, like maybe a potato that size. The other thing, so these plants all look pretty wild, but they definitely have something in common with each other. Do you notice what that is, Anne? I think
it would be the spadix. They're so
right.
They're familiar looking. Yeah.
Yeah, here we have a close-up of that Amorphophallus muellarii, which I really love this bloom. And you can see some definitely distinctive parts there. So first on the outside, we have the spathe. So I'll point this out when we get back over to the corpse flower, but this is sort of a protective coating, covering as well. It allows attracting the insects. So you can imagine if this one were to smell like our corpse flower friend, this is easy to recognize as maybe some rotting meat, right? It's got all kinds of weird colors going on there. So that spathe will protect it as well, will attract some pollinators. And then that center part, the entire structure, is called a spadix. And those two structures, the spathe and the spadix, are really the indicative ones of the Amorphophallus and the whole family of Araceae, or the arum family. And what I find most fascinating is that this isn't a whole flower, but if you notice each one of these, so you'll see all the individual flowers there in the center. And you've got the larger female flowers at the base, which will produce fruit if they're pollinated. And then above that are all the male flowers, which produce lots of pollen. And so these are structures that will show us, that these plants are in the same family. And I'm pretty sure, Anne, do you have any that you know, or do you have something to say?
I was going to ask you a question. So do each of them have the male and the female plants on the same spadix? Is that also a common trait for this genus?
That's a good question.
Okay.
So in general, yes. Some of them, the flowers are what we would call perfect, where they would have both the male, the pollen-producing parts, as well as the female, the fruit-producing portion in the same flower. Others, like the Amorphophallus, have them in distinctive bands, where you have female flowers in one area and male flowers in the other area. And that will decrease the likelihood of self-pollination. And also, generally, they are available at different times. So just like the corpse flower, the female flowers are receiving pollen on that first night, and then they're totally unreceptive, and they've started to shrivel up even on the second evening. And those male flowers start to give off their pollen so that it gets taken to a different flower and not wasted on this one. So you increase genetic diversity. So there are a few that are more, common, maybe we see around the house, that actually are also in this family, that I figured we'd take a look at. Do you have any that you might guess offhand?
There's one that comes to mind, and I use it as an example, and people always think of it, is the calla lily or Easter
That's
lily that we
right.
know
Yeah,
of.
the calla lily.
Yeah,
Good old
that's
calla lily. And I think
beautiful,
a photo
perfect lily.
here.
Yeah.
A wonderful plant. Honestly, around here in the Bay Area, they can almost be considered weeds. They pop up everywhere, and I've had a few in friends' gardens that are nearly impossible to get rid of. But I really like them. And before I learned all about the corpse flower, I never gave too much thought about the calla lily. But that centerpiece there, you can see the spadix really clearly. And what we might think of as a petal is the spade, is the white part on the calla lily. And I've noticed, at least in my backyard, that mostly they're visited by flies. I never really thought about what pollinates a calla lily, but they definitely aren't visited by bees. There's no nectar, so it's kind of an
Hmm.
interesting one there. We also have a really common houseplant. I call these next ones like the reception desk plant. One of them, anyway, is the anthurium.
Hmm.
So again, there you can see that really pronounced spadix in the center, which is yellow in this particular case, and then that really beautiful spathe, the red part there in the anthurium. I also really like the anthuriums. They're known also by another common name, the painter's palette, because it looks like a palette that a painter might use. And oftentimes they can almost have sort of an iridescence to them, so you get a lot of different colors from one plant. And then one of our
And
most
they
famous,
last a long time, Drew. They last a
they
long time.
do. They last a very long
Something I've
time. They
noticed.
even last pretty well as cut flowers, which is really nice if you wanted to make an
Hmm.
arrangement. And then our very last one that at least I was going to feature here is our philodendron speciosum, which we named Phil. We refer to him as Phil. So this plant is a giant philodendron. It's about 30 or 40 feet tall, and it's over 100 years, still 100 years old. It still produces these beautiful inflorescences. And there you can really see the structures again. So the spadix in the center, which you can't tell from here. This is a very far off shot that I had to zoom in to get the canopy there. But you can, if you looked really closely, those would be individual flowers there on that center spadix. And these are actually only open for one day, and then they close up so tightly that they would expel any beetles or anyone who might have pollinated them. And we think that the plant is trying to force them away so they don't eat the developing seeds. Sometimes I imagine like a
Oh.
little Indiana Jones situation with little beetles running out for their lives.
And if that was Phil, then that was huge. That
Yeah,
must have been
so
a massive. Yeah.
that bloom, they often will come crashing down from the canopy, so we have to remove them pretty early. But they often are up to 2 feet long and weigh a pretty hefty amount. They're full of this like really sticky caustic sap. It's wild too when we dive into the ways rainforest plants keep alive. It's probably a whole
Uh,
nother show.
and that's just a giant version of what I always point out to people is a very common houseplant as well.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
almost
the
everybody
philodendron.
has a philodendron monastera,
Hmm.
something in their house. The cheese plant, I think people call it here as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the Swiss cheese plant, or the pothos, the golden pothos is also in the arum family. Um, if I kept thinking about it, I could go on and on with the list because they're great plants, and a lot of the tropicals, of course, end up doing really well in the house because they often like the same conditions. So you can see all these lovelies behind me. So,
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
all right. Well, one last look. So we'll take a look here. I wanted to give everybody a taste of what we should expect. So do you have any guess on the bloom, Anne? What do you think?
I was peering hard in the glass this afternoon. And I think it could be 2 or 3 days, but it's hard to tell because you can
Yeah,
always, not being so close, you can see the crimson color coming in though. You can see the flush
yeah,
and you can
that's
see the
exactly what I was going
broadening.
to say. Yeah, and I also noticed, you mentioned this to me earlier, I also noticed you can see just ever so slightly a little bit of it kind of relaxing at the very tip. But that color change that you mentioned is really the thing we're looking for. So here we've got the live view again. And right on that ruffled edge, you can really start to see, and then where the two folds of the spathe overlap, you can really see that kind of maroon color coming in, which really is one of the most spectacular parts of this whole plant. This is that maroon color.
Do you have a picture
So
of Terra before?
before, like last bloom,
The last bloom, yeah.
Yeah, so here
Yeah,
we have a
there it
good
is. Yes.
view of Terra the
Yeah.
Titan in full bloom. On the night, I can't remember exactly which date, but it was sometime I think in June of 2017. So around 3 years
Hmm.
ago, a little less than 3 years ago now, a little more than 3 years ago now, I should say. Um, Full bloom, and I can tell you, it definitely lived up to its corpse flower name.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
It was funny. You could smell it approaching the building. You could smell.
yeah,
You could smell. You could smell it, and it was at the far end of the building. But approaching the building, it was like a waft. A waft was coming off the out of the glass. It's incredible.
it's
It's
wild,
really
really. They
powerful.
say there's a lot of, these estimates are really kind of all over the place, but they estimate that humans can probably smell it for around a mile or so, maybe more, in the dense Sumatran jungle. So that would be, I can't even imagine what that equates to. Imagine if you were a dog, how like pungent it would be. Yeah, I just think
Oh,
about that.
terrible.
But it should be
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So let's do one last look at the live feed. You can
Well,
see Tara
Drew,
there.
what's your guess?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm sticking to. I keep saying probably Sunday or Monday, maybe Saturday, but it's getting close. We're getting to crunch time, and we're gonna have quite a show. The other thing I wanted to let everybody know is that you can kind of see in the live feed there that Tara is positioned, as we've mentioned, right at the front door. So up until the bloom, you'll be able to check it out safely from a distance, and take a look through the glass. And then when the bloom happens, whenever that might be, you can actually follow us on Instagram at Conservatory Flowers. Is probably a great way for updates. We also have a Facebook account that you can follow also. But you can go right up to the building and take a look on Bloom Day. And we hope also to be able to let everyone smell it. So we've devised a way to have the doors open and have everybody socially distanced and safely observe and even smell the bloom. So it should be fantastic.
And will that be in the evening when it starts?
Yes, exactly. So we'll find out. We typically find out with these plants anywhere after 2 p.m. So my estimate is always around 2 to 4 p.m. is a good window that we'll know it's going to be that night. And that's why I would definitely recommend following our Instagram, turn on notifications. We'll also have, I believe, a broadcast on that night for like a live version of some type of broadcast. So stay tuned. But I'm
Well,
totally
we'll see you
excited.
then.
Yeah, I'll be there on site.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
either I'll see you digitally or I'll see you from 6 feet away. So excellent. Well,
Super.
thank you all for watching. Thanks for joining me, Anne. This was wonderful. Hope you enjoyed a little
My pleasure.
virtual visit to the conservatory. Great. Well, again, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.